let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you think about money, do you feel calm? Or do you feel alert? Not stressed exactly, just on edge. Like something could go wrong, because for most people money isn't a tool, it's a pressure system, a quiet one, the kind that hums in the background while you're eating dinner, scrolling your phone, or trying to fall asleep. And here's the strange part. Most people think their situation is personal. They think they're behind because they messed up, because they chose the wrong major, the wrong job, the wrong city, the wrong decade to be born. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is that normal is quietly broken? Today, we're going to look at the actual numbers behind the average American's financial life. Not vibes, not Instagram lifestyles, not the guy who bought a truck he definitely shouldn't have. Real data. And fair warning, some of these stats will make you feel better, others will make you sit up a little straighter. Either way, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand. And more importantly, you'll understand why so many smart, hard-working people still feel financially stuck. Let's start with income, because everything else flows from this. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median full-time worker in the U.S. earns just over $1,000 per week. That's roughly $52,000 per year before taxes. Median, not average, meaning half of workers earn more than that. Half earn less. If you're making around $25 to $26 an hour, congratulations, you're perfectly normal. Now here's where reality hits. That $52,000 is before taxes. After federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and whatever your state decides it needs this year, your take-home pay shrinks fast. For many people, that $52,000 turns into $38,000 or less. That's about $3,200 a month. Before rent, before food, before transportation, before life shows up uninvited. Suddenly, middle income doesn't feel very middle. And remember, this is the middle of the pack. This isn't the struggling edge. This is normal. Now let's talk about what people do with that income. Because income alone doesn't tell you much. Spending does. According to government data, the average American household spends about $5,500 per month. That's roughly $67,000 per year. Take a moment and let that sink in. The median individual earns $52,000. The average household spends $67,000, which means, for many families, the math doesn't work unless there are multiple incomes, debt, or both. Let's break that spending down. Housing is the big one. The average household spends nearly $1,900 per month on housing. That includes rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, property taxes, and maintenance. That's over $22,000 per year just to exist indoors. And if you live in a major metro area, that number probably sounds adorable. Like a starter price from 2009. Food comes next, around $700 per month on groceries and eating out. Transportation is close behind at about $900 per month. Car payments, insurance, gas, maintenance. That's nearly $11,000 a year just to get places. Add those three categories together. Housing, food, transportation, you're already over $3,500 per month. And we haven't talked about healthcare, childcare, phones, internet, subscriptions you forgot you signed up for. This is how people with decent jobs still feel broke. Not because they're irresponsible, because the baseline cost of normal life is high. Now let's talk about savings, or more accurately, the lack of it. According to the Federal Reserve, the median retirement savings for Americans who actually have retirement accounts is about $65,000. Median, again, half have more, half have less. But here's the part that changes how you hear that number. About 1 in 4 Americans has zero retirement savings. Nothing. Number 4, 01K. No IRA. No pension. Just vibes and hope. That means the median is being pulled up by people who are doing okay. The reality underneath is far worse. Now let's break it down by age. People under 25, median retirement savings, under $2,000. Understandable. You're young, you're just starting out. But ages 25 to 34, around $14,000. That's after a decade in the workforce for many people. Ages 65 and older, median retirement savings, under $90,000. Let's pause here. If you retire with $90,000 and follow the classic safe withdrawal rate of 4%, that gives you about $3,600 per year. That's $300 per month. $300. That doesn't even cover groceries. This is why Social Security matters so much, and why it scares people. The average Social Security benefit is about $1,550 per month. Roughly $18,600 per year. And that's the average, meaning plenty of people receive less. So if you combine average retirement savings with average Social Security, you're not looking at a lifestyle, you're looking at survival. Now let's talk about debt, because this is where the story turns dark. The average American household carries over $9,000 in credit card debt. Not student loans, not a mortgage. Credit cards. High interest, no asset, already forgotten purchases. At interest rates north of 20%, that means thousands of dollars per year are being burned just to stand still. This is why people feel like they work and never get ahead. They're climbing up a down escalator. Now here's the ironic part. Despite all of this, the average credit score in America is around 715, which is good. So people aren't completely reckless. They pay bills, they manage accounts. They're doing their best. They're just operating inside a system that quietly drains them. This is the part no one explains. You can do everything right and still feel stuck if you're playing the wrong game. And most people are, because they're told to focus on income, not structure. Spending, not strategy. Appearance, not resilience. Which brings us to net worth. Net worth is what you own minus what you owe. And according to the Federal Reserve, the median American household net worth is about $120,000. Sounds decent, right? Until you break it down by age. Under 35? Less than $15,000. That's furniture money, not freedom money. Ages 35 to 44, around $90,000. Ages 45 to 54, about $170,000. These numbers are achievable, but they also show how long it takes to build stability when you're constantly paying for yesterday. Now here's the part most people miss. The average American saves about 6% of their income. 6%. That's it. And that includes everything. Emergency funds, down payments, retirement. At that rate, it's almost impossible to build real margin. Which explains why so many people live one surprise away from panic. This isn't about intelligence, it's about math. And the math of normal doesn't work very well. In the next part, we're going to talk about what these numbers actually mean for your life. Why being average financially is far riskier than people realize. And how a few small structural changes can quietly put you ahead of most of the country, without becoming a finance bro or giving up your sanity. Now let's talk about something even more uncomfortable than income and debt. Stability. Because when people say, "I'm doing okay," what they usually mean is, nothing bad has happened recently. That's not stability. That's luck on a short leash. According to the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money or selling something. $400. That's a tire. That's a minor medical bill. That's one awkward email from your landlord. And suddenly the plan is credit cards, payment plans, or pretending it didn't happen. This stat alone explains half of modern anxiety. Because when you know one small problem can knock you over, your nervous system never relaxes. You might look fine, you might sound fine, but internally, you're braced for impact. That constant readiness changes how you live. You avoid risks that could actually improve your life. You stay in situations longer than you should. You prioritize short-term comfort over long-term progress. Not because you're weak, because you're exposed. Let's talk about emergency savings, because this is where fantasy collides with reality. Financial experts love to say you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved. Sounds reasonable. Until you do the math. If your monthly expenses are $4,000, 6 months is $24,000. That's not a suggestion. That's a different lifestyle. And the reality, the median American household has less than $8,000 in liquid savings. That's not 6 months. That's barely 6 weeks. Which means for most people, emergencies aren't interruptions. They're disasters. This is why small problems feel big. Because they are. Relative to your buffer. Now let's talk about work again. Because money stats don't live in spreadsheets. They live in your calendar. Before savings, your job owns more of you than it should. You answer emails faster than you want. You agree to things you don't like. You stay quiet in meetings. That's workplace economics. Now let's talk about risk. Because Americans have a weird relationship with risk. We glorify it. We tell stories about big bets and overnight success. But in real life, most people are terrified of change. Not because change is scary, because failure feels unaffordable. When you have no safety net, failure isn't feedback, it's a crisis. So people avoid risks that could actually pay off. They don't switch careers, they don't invest in new skills, they don't start side projects, they don't even negotiate, because the downside feels too heavy. Savings flips that. Once you have a buffer, risk becomes measurable. You start asking questions instead of panicking. What's the worst case? How long would it take to recover? Is this reversible? Those are powerful questions, and they're impossible to ask when you're living paycheck to paycheck. This is why people with savings seem more confident. Not because they know everything, because they know they can survive mistakes. Now let's talk about investing. Because this is where a lot of people get confused. They think investing is about being smart. It's not. It's about staying calm. The biggest enemy of returns isn't bad picks. It's panic. Selling when markets drop. Chasing hype. Abandoning plans halfway through. Savings protects you from yourself. If your emergency fund is solid, market volatility feels annoying, not threatening. You don't need to sell at the worst moment. You don't need to do something just to feel in control. You can wait, and waiting beats activity in investing almost every time. This is why boring investors win. They don't react. They don't overthink. They don't confuse movement with progress. Now let's talk about spending. Because this is where emotions sneak in. A lot of spending isn't logical. It's emotional regulation. Bad day, buy something. Stressful week, treat yourself. Nothing wrong with enjoyment. But when spending becomes therapy, it gets expensive. And temporary. Savings changes that dynamic. When your life feels stable, you don't need purchases to calm down. You don't need the dopamine hit. You don't need the distraction. That alone reduces impulse spending dramatically. Not through discipline, through relief. Now let's talk about social pressure. Because this quietly drains more money than people realize. You don't want to feel behind. You don't want to be the one who says no. So you spend to keep up. Dinners, trips, upgrades. not because you truly want them, because you don't want to feel different. Savings gives you confidence to opt out. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't apologize. You just choose. That's freedom, not the flashy kind, the quiet kind. Now let's talk about lifestyle inflation, because this is where many people sabotage themselves without realizing it. When income goes up, spending follows. New car, better place. More subscriptions, more commitments. The problem isn't enjoying life. The problem is locking yourself into higher fixed costs. Fixed costs reduce flexibility. They turn small income changes into big stress. Savings pushes back against that. It forces you to ask, is this actually improving my life? Or is it just raising the stakes? People with savings tend to live simpler lives. Not because they have to, because they choose to. They value margin more than appearances. And margin is powerful. Now let's talk about identity, because identity is the engine behind behavior. Before savings, many people see themselves as bad with money. They avoid looking too closely. They procrastinate. They hope things work out. After savings, that story breaks. You have proof. Proof that you can plan. Proof that you can follow through. Proof that you can delay gratification without collapsing. That proof changes how you see yourself, and once self-image changes, behavior follows. You stop self-sabotaging. You stop making excuses. You start acting like someone who has options. That's the real compounding effect. Not interest. Identity. Now let's be clear. Savings doesn't solve everything. It doesn't protect you from every problem. It doesn't remove effort from life. But it removes desperation. And desperation is the most expensive state a person can be in. Without desperation, you stop making fear-based decisions. You stop trading your future for short-term relief. You stop reacting. You start designing. That's the shift. And once you experience it, you don't want to go back. In the next part, we're going to zoom out even further. We'll talk about time. Why money is really stored time. How savings buys flexibility instead of stuff. And why this milestone quietly changes how you experience your own life. Let's talk about the one thing no one ever puts in a budget. Time. Because money is never just money. Money is stored time. Every dollar you earn represents hours of your life you already spent. Every dollar you save represents hours of your future you just protected. And this is where everything starts to click. Before savings, time feels aggressive. You wake up already behind. Your calendar owns you. Every delay feels dangerous. You're not thinking about next year. You're thinking about next Friday. Living like that does something to your brain. It shortens your patience. It narrows your thinking. It makes you reactive. That's why people without savings often say yes too fast and quit too emotionally. They're not flaky. They're under pressure. But once you have real savings, time changes texture. You don't rush as much. You don't feel like every decision has to be perfect immediately. You can pause. And that pause is where intelligence shows up. Here's a situation most people recognize. Your boss asks you to take on more responsibility. Before savings, your body answers before your brain does. You say yes. You tell yourself it's temporary. You'll figure it out. Because saying no feels risky. After savings, you slow down. You ask questions. You negotiate. You decide. Because the consequence of saying no isn't catastrophic anymore. That changes the power dynamic. Power doesn't come from being loud. It comes from having options. Savings gives you options. Now let's talk about health. Because money stress doesn't stay in your bank account. It lives in your body. Financial stress raises cortisol. High cortisol wrecks sleep. Bad sleep wrecks judgment. Bad judgment wrecks finances. It's a loop. Savings interrupts that loop. Quietly. People with emergency funds sleep better. They recover faster from stress. They're less emotionally reactive. That's not self-care fluff. That's biology. When your nervous system isn't constantly on alert, your brain works better. You think clearer. You plan further ahead. You make fewer impulsive decisions. That alone can change your entire trajectory. Now let's talk about patience. Patience isn't a personality trait. It's a financial condition. When you have no buffer, patience feels impossible. Waiting costs too much. So you rush. You settle. You overpay. Savings makes waiting affordable, and waiting is where leverage lives. Being able to wait means you don't buy at the worst time. You don't sell in panic. You don't accept the first offer just to end discomfort. That applies to careers, investing, and relationships. Now let's talk about investing again, but from the angle people rarely discuss. Most people think investing is about picking the right stocks. It's not. It's about behavior. The best strategy in the world fails if you panic. Savings protects your behavior. Because when markets drop and your emergency fund is solid, you don't freak out. You don't sell at the bottom. You don't abandon the plan. You stay rational. And rational beats smart over the long run. This is why boring investors tend to win. They don't react. They don't chase hype. They don't confuse movement with progress. They wait. And waiting compounds. Now let's talk about emotional spending. Because this is where money leaks quietly. A lot of purchases aren't practical. They're emotional. Bad day? Buy something. Stressful week? Treat yourself. There's nothing wrong with enjoyment. But when spending becomes therapy, it gets expensive and temporary. Savings changes that. When your life feels stable, you don't need purchases to calm down. You don't need the dopamine hit. You don't need the distraction. That dramatically reduces impulse spending. Not through discipline, through relief. Now let's talk about social pressure. Because this drains money faster than people realize. You don't want to feel behind. You don't want to be the only one saying no. So you spend. Trips, dinners, upgrades, not because you truly want them, because you don't want to feel different. Savings gives you permission to opt out. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't apologize. You choose. That's freedom. Quiet freedom. Now let's talk about freedom properly. Not the Instagram version. Not quitting your job tomorrow. Real freedom is flexibility. It's knowing you could adapt if something changed. It's not panicking when plans fall apart. It's having margin. And $10,000 is the first real margin most people ever experience. Not enough to retire, enough to breathe. Now here's something people miss. Financial progress isn't about accumulation. It's about reduction. Reducing stress, reducing forced decisions, reducing pressure. Savings reduces the number of decisions you're forced to make under urgency. That's why life feels simpler. Not because you have more, because you're less constrained. Now think about what this does to your future self. Saving $10,000 sends a signal. I can handle problems. That belief compounds. You trust yourself more. You avoid less. You take responsibility instead of hoping things magically work out. That psychological shift matters more than any spreadsheet. Now let's be honest. This doesn't make you perfect. You'll still make mistakes. You'll still waste money sometimes. That's fine. The difference is those mistakes won't threaten your stability. They'll just be mistakes. And mistakes are cheap when you can afford them. Here's the part nobody tells you. Once you cross this line, you don't want to go back. Not because you're greedy, because you felt calm, and calm is addictive. In a healthy way, it's the absence of constant background anxiety, the absence of feeling one step away from disaster. And once you've experienced that, You protect it. That's why people who build emergency funds tend to keep them, not because they're disciplined, because they're aware. And awareness changes behavior. Now we're ready for the final piece. Because everything we've talked about points to one conclusion. This isn't really about money. It's about control. Control over your time, control over your decisions, control over your future. And in the final part, we're going to bring it all together. We'll talk about the system, the illusion of normal, and how to step out of constant financial pressure without becoming rich or miserable. And yes, we'll end with something that sticks. At some point, a strange thought sneaks into your head. Not, how do I make more money? But this, why does everyone look busy and still seem stressed? Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. People are working harder than ever. Side hustles, overtime, productivity apps, motivational podcasts at 1.25 times speed. And yet the tension never really goes away. Because most people aren't building stability. They're maintaining the appearance of stability. They're running just fast enough to stay in place, and the system quietly rewards that behavior. Because urgency is profitable. When you're rushed, you don't negotiate. When you're stressed, you pay for convenience. When you're tired, you accept bad deals just to make the problem go away. That's not a moral failure. That's an environment designed around pressure. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards positioning. It rewards people who can wait. And waiting requires savings. Without savings, you're forced into the short game. Paycheck to paycheck, bill to bill, crisis to crisis. With savings, you step out of urgency. And urgency is where most bad decisions are made. That's why financial calm feels almost rebellious. You stop reacting, you pause, you think. And pausing breaks the cycle. Now let's talk about normal. Because normal is expensive in America. Normal is financing cars longer than you'll keep them. Normal is subscriptions you forgot you signed up for. Normal is lifestyle upgrades that quietly lock you into higher fixed costs. Normal looks fine, but it's fragile. One missed paycheck, one medical bill, one unexpected repair, and suddenly everything shakes. Saving money exposes that fragility, not to scare you, but to wake you up. Because once you see how thin the line was, you stop chasing appearances. You start prioritizing resilience. And resilience is the most underrated form of wealth. Here's the paradox. People think financial freedom looks exciting. It doesn't. It looks boring. Emergency funds, long-term thinking, saying no to things that don't actually improve your life. From the outside, it doesn't impress. From the inside, it feels incredible. It feels like not panicking when something breaks. It feels like not checking your bank account before every decision. It feels like knowing you'll be okay. That's the reward nobody markets. Because calm doesn't sell. You have to build it. Now let's address the biggest illusion of all. That earning more will automatically fix everything. It won't. Higher income without structure just raises the stakes. Bigger bills, bigger commitments, bigger pressure. That's why so many high earners feel trapped. They didn't build margin, they built obligations. Savings simplifies life. It reduces forced decisions. It reduces stress-based spending. It reduces dependence. And reduction is power. Now zoom out. What does saving real money actually represent? It's not a finish line. It's a threshold. The moment fear stops running the show. The moment time starts working with you instead of against you. The moment money becomes a tool instead of a threat. That's why this matters. Not because of what money buys, because of what it removes. Panic, urgency, desperation. Those are expensive. Now let's be honest. This doesn't make life perfect. You'll still make mistakes. You'll still waste money on things you regret later. You'll still have bad months. That's life. The difference is those mistakes won't define you. They won't knock you off balance. They'll just be experiences, and learning is cheap when you're stable. This is why people who cross this line rarely go back. Not because they're disciplined, because they're aware. They've felt the difference between reacting and choosing. And once you've felt that, going back feels unbearable. Now let's bring this home. This channel isn't about hype. It's not about flexing. It's not about pretending money is easy. It's about understanding how the game actually works. So you can stop blaming yourself and start positioning yourself. If this video made you uncomfortable in a useful way, if it explained feelings you've had but never put into words, if it made you rethink what normal actually costs, then do 3 simple things. First, subscribe, not because we promise shortcuts, but because this channel exists to talk about money honestly, intelligently, and without treating you like an idiot. Second, like the video. Not for ego, but because it helps this message reach people who need clarity instead of noise. And third, send this video to one person. One real person, someone you actually care about, someone you'd want to have a long, honest conversation with about money, life, and the future. Not to lecture them, just to start the conversation. And finally, leave a thoughtful comment. Not great video. Tell us what hit. What surprised you? What you're going to think about differently, because this wasn't made casually. It was built carefully. For people who think deeply, but still enjoy a little sarcasm along the way. Money doesn't have to control you, but you do have to understand it. And now, you do.